All right, ladies and gentlemen, we are on to lesson 8.4, trigonometry. We're going to stretch this lesson over about 4 days of work, which means that's probably about 8 days, give or take. So we're going to first start with some vocabulary. So I'm going to have you press pause, fill out the next few slides, and then I will talk about them. Okay, trigonometry comes from two Greek words, trigon meaning triangle and metron meaning measure. The study of trigonometry involves triangle measurement, and what we're going to be looking at is ratios. And again, ratios are just fractions of the two side lengths of a right triangle. So you can see here that we have a ratio right here, and that is just making a fraction between sides AC and AB. So if there were numbers there, we would just see numbers and we could just make a fraction. Okay, we'll move on to the next page. Okay, so the first vocabulary word is called sine, S-I-N-E. And sine is going to be a ratio that is going to be the opposite side over the hypotenuse. And so we did talk about this a bit in the last preview lesson, which sides would be opposite and how it depends on the angle. So our sine is always going to be opposite over hypotenuse, again, depending on the angle. So the first one you can see I did here with angle A. That was side A over side C because that's our hypotenuse. And then if we changed our angle, so let's say we're talking about angle B. If we changed and start talking about angle B, well, the side opposite of B would be that B that goes there over the hypotenuse again, which is this C value. So again, we're just looking at making fractions if there were to be numbers in there. Okay, the next vocabulary word is called cosine, and it's abbreviated COS. Cosine, again, is going to be a ratio that puts the adjacent side over the hypotenuse, and again, all depending on the angle. So if we were to be talking about angle A, for instance, here, the side adjacent would be the B. And again, that's because this guy would be considered your hypotenuse, this would be opposite, and then this would be your A. So again, it's always going to be the ratio of adjacent over hypotenuse. Again, so if we change that just a little bit, let's see if I can go here and just erase this for a second. So if we were to look at, again, the other angle here, say angle B. So if I'm looking at angle B over here, and again, I'm looking at adjacent. So here would be my adjacent, here would be my hypotenuse, and this side over here would be my opposite. So we would only use the A and the H in this case. And the last one, vocabulary word, is called tangent. And tangent is going to be the opposite over the hypotenuse. Opposite over adjacent. So again, if we're talking about angle A and we're going to label our sides, here would be our opposite, here would be our hypotenuse, and here would be our adjacent. So we would say that it would be opposite over adjacent, so it would be side A over side B. Again, I'm going to erase here. So if we were to change that angle that we were talking about, and let's say now talk about angle B, then our opposite and our adjacent would switch. Change colors. So if we were talking about this angle here, here's still my hypotenuse, but now this becomes my opposite and this guy becomes my adjacent. So we're just going to practice on using the correct ratios depending on opposite, adjacent, or hypotenuse. So I'll just do a couple of examples. I split mine up so that I have that picture on each problem. You might want to take a minute and draw triangle M and L on each of those letters, A, B, C, D, E, F, however many there are. So first of all, I want to recognize that they're asking me to calculate sine in this case. So I am going to just label my parts in terms of how they relate to angle L. So if I'm talking about angle L, opposite would go over here, adjacent would be on this side, and this opposite of my right angle would be my hypotenuse. So if I'm going to make a fraction, I know it does say to leave it as the nearest hundredth, but let's just leave it as a fraction or a ratio, not simplified. So sine again is opposite over hypotenuse. Sorry, scoot this up just a little bit. Okay, so if we notice it's opposite over hypotenuse, we need to know the opposite side is equal to 12, and then it's going to be over the hypotenuse, which is 37. Moving on to the next one. Again, they're asking now for cosine, still in terms of L. So if here's my angle L, this is opposite, here's my hypotenuse, here's my adjacent. So I need a fraction that is adjacent over hypotenuse. And again, my value here is going to be my adjacent side, which is 35, over my hypotenuse, again, which is 37. And you can just leave it as this fraction. Okay, the next one, this one again is talking in terms of L. So I really am not changing anything. Here's my opposite, here's my adjacent, here's my hypotenuse. But again, tangent is going to be opposite over adjacent. And the opposite side here would be 12. And the adjacent side is going to be my 35. So I'm just going to leave that as my fraction. Now we're going to switch this time, and we're going to talk about things in terms of angle N. So I'm just going to change my pen color here. So here's my angle of reference, which means this side is going to be my opposite. The one across from my right angle is my hypotenuse, and this guy then would be my next two guy. He's adjacent. So again, they're asking us sine. So sine is going to be opposite or hypotenuse. So in this case, our opposite side is 35. Our hypotenuse is 37, and we just leave it like that. Okay, we are on E. So again, we're talking in terms of angle N. So here would be my opposite. Here's my hypotenuse. Here's my adjacent. Cosine again is equal to A adjacent over hypotenuse. Just give me a second. So in this case, my adjacent side is 12. My hypotenuse is 37, and I'm just going to leave it like that. Again, in terms of n, so here's my opposite, here's my adjacent, here's my hypotenuse. Tangent is going to be opposite over adjacent. So my opposite side here is the 35. My adjacent side is the 12. I'm just going to leave it again like that. So I'd like you to try the next couple and then press pause, and then I will just show you the answers and you can check your work. Okay, I have the angle A as my reference angle. You can see I've labeled the hypotenuse, adjacent, and opposite. So check your answers. Again, you could reduce those, of course. I'm just not for time's sake. So I'm going to press pause, I'm going to erase, and then use B as my reference angle, and then we'll check your work. Okay, just remember when we change our reference angle, our hypotenuse will stay the same, but our adjacent and our opposite will switch. So you can see I have them labeled, and then I have the correct ratios written in there. Again, you can definitely write those more simplified. So we're looking at 8 for day 1 homework, and then next week we'll be working on using this with our special triangles that we learned about in 8.3. Bye for now.